Let's do something a little different today. We're going to take a snapshot of our entire world on one single day, November 14th, 2025.
So, what's the big idea here? Well, we're trying to answer a simple but also massive question. What can the headlines from just one day really tell us about where we're all heading? It's kind of like we're piecing together a giant puzzle, one news story at a time. All right, let's dive right in. First up, international flashpoints. It seems like on this particular day, the world is just crackling with conflict.
Okay, so right off the bat, we're in the Western Hemisphere, where the U.S. has just announced a new military campaign. It's called Operation Southern Spear, and the official line is that it's targeting so-called narco-terrorists throughout the Caribbean.
And this isn't coming out of nowhere. This announcement comes right as the Pentagon confirms that another boat has been struck. That brings the total number of these strikes up to 20.
So, what's the human cost of all this? The reported death toll is now at 80. And here's the part that's really raising eyebrows. While the Pentagon says the boats were carrying drugs, officials are also admitting they don't actually know who has been killed. And yeah, the world is not staying silent on this one. The campaign is facing a huge wave of international condemnation. We're talking the UN's human rights chief, the European Union, neighboring countries like Mexico and Colombia. They're all calling these strikes unlawful extrajudicial killings. And it's not just international. Even some U.S. lawmakers are sounding the alarm.
Now, while all of that's happening, let's jump halfway across the globe to Ukraine. The capital, Kyiv, is reeling from one of the largest attacks it's seen since the full-scale invasion really kicked off back in 2022. It was a massive assault. We're talking hundreds of drones, dozens of missiles, and many of them slammed into residential buildings. To really get a sense of the terror on the ground, just listen to what one resident said. "I was terrified. I didn't know what to do first. Should I rescue myself and my child, or should I run to help others?" That's a choice no one should ever have to face.
And the crises don't stop there. Over in Gaza, a completely different but just as urgent situation is developing. With heavy rains on the way, officials are putting out warnings that more than 900,000 displaced people are in immediate danger of flooding. And a big reason for that is because Israeli attacks have wiped out most of the water and sewage systems.
This is all happening against a backdrop of record-breaking violence in the occupied West Bank. After settlers set a mosque on fire, a local activist named Nazmi Salman put it this way: "This attack comes within the framework of the declared war against the Palestinian people by settlers with the support of the occupation government." His words really highlight just how many layers of crisis are unfolding all at once.
Okay, so we've been looking at global conflicts. Now let's bring the focus back home, to the United States, where, things feel just as fractured.
So check this out, because it's a real head-scratcher. The longest government shutdown in U.S. history is finally over. You'd think that's a reason for relief, right? But instead, food banks are seeing record-breaking lines. So, what gives? Well, even though the government is technically open, SNAP food benefits that were held back still haven't been released in about 2/3 of the states.
And it's not just the government. Look at the complicated, some might say contradictory messages coming from other major institutions. At their big annual meeting, the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops put out a statement condemning the dehumanizing rhetoric and violence against migrants. But then, in that very same meeting, they voted to ban gender-affirming care at all Catholic hospitals across the country.
At the same time, the administration is making legal immigration tougher using something called the public charge rule. So what is that? Basically, it's a policy that lets the government deny someone a visa if they think that person might one day need to rely on public benefits, like food aid. Critics are calling it a pretty dangerous policy that basically punishes people for following the rules.
But look, it wasn't all conflict and division on this day. For our last section, we're going to look at something different. People and movements that are challenging the way things are, whether it's in the workplace, in politics, or even in space. So let's kick things off with a cup of coffee. Or, actually, no coffee. Because on this day, over 1,000 Starbucks workers walked off the job. It was a one-day strike that hit 65 different stores. They timed this strike for Red Cup Day, one of the company's busiest days of the year, to protest what they call union busting and a refusal to negotiate contracts. And a 23-year-old barista named Ray Shaw really captured the frustration. He said, "I'm putting in overtime every week just so I could afford my rent, and meanwhile our CEO is making $96 million for only 4 months of work." And they are not alone in this fight. They're getting some big-name support. New York's mayor, Alexa Ocasio-Mamani, set out this super simple but really powerful message of support online. No contract, no coffee. A crystal clear signal for the striking workers.
And you can see that same kind of energy, that same challenge to the status quo, in politics too. Over in Seattle, there's been a huge political upset. A community organizer named Katie Wilson just won the mayoral election. She beat the incumbent by really focusing her campaign on affordability in a city where it's just gotten insanely expensive to live. So, what's your plan for the city? Well, her platform is really built on things like progressive taxes for the wealthiest households, and then using that money to fund programs like universal childcare and social housing. The goal, in her words, is to create an economy with more wealth owned by communities, not corporations.
And for our last story of the day, we have a challenge that is literally out of this world. A new major player has just officially entered the commercial space race, and it's getting ready to really shake things up.
Yeah, this is a huge moment. We're talking about Jeff Bezos' company, Blue Origin. They just successfully landed their giant New Glenn rocket booster for the very first time. This is a direct shot at Elon Musk's SpaceX, which, as you know, pretty much dominates the industry right now with its Starlink satellites. Blue Origin's end goal? To build its own competing satellite network. And this landing is a massive, massive step.
So there you have it. From military strikes in the Caribbean to labor strikes at Starbucks, from a war-torn Kyiv to a political upset in Seattle, we've seen a whole world of conflict, tension, and incredible change all packed into just 24 hours. And it really makes you wonder, right? If this is what happens in just one day, what on earth does tomorrow hold?